America's longest war is over. The Pentagon says the last U.S. troops have flown out of Afghanistan after a 20-year mission. The departure comes after 2 weeks of chaotic and desperate scenes in and around Kabul airport as thousands of foreign nationals and Afghan citizens tried to flee. The Taliban have now taken control of the airport and proclaimed Afghanistan's full independence.
There's no doubt who's in control here. Taliban fighters parade their win on the tarmac of Kabul's international airport. Some even taking selfies from the cockpit of an abandoned aircraft.
Thank God. First of all, I would like to say that Afghanistan is finally, in every sense, free and independent. And our forces are controlling the military and civilian parts of the airport. Normal activity of the airport will be started very soon.
Close by, military aircraft, some apparently disabled in the rush by American troops to get out of Afghanistan as fast as possible. Just hours earlier, the commander of the 82nd Airborne Division became the last US service member to leave. That prompted celebratory gunfire at the airport to mark the ending of this bitter 20-year war.
Thank God that we took our country's independence. All Muslims, all Mujahideen and all Afghanistan people are happy and share the happiness with us.
Taliban soldiers may be enjoying their victory, but the chaos of the last desperate days here is left, plain for all to see. Long queues continue to build up outside Kabul's banks. And there isn't a woman in sight. The Taliban is expected to form a government within the next few days. A chastened international community says it's hopeful it won't be as extreme as feared. But on the ground, it's clear who holds the power.
Let's get an update on the situation in Kabul. We can speak to journalist Franz Marty now. Franz, American troops have now fully left the country after 20 years. What are things like in Kabul today with the Taliban fully in control?
I was briefly in the city center today, and there wasn't much of a difference to the past days. So shops were open, people were going about their business. There were maybe a little bit fewer people on the street, certainly fewer women, but there were still women around. There is still, like, the Taliban haven't imposed like new rules or something like that. Most of it continues as before. The atmosphere wasn't jubilant, so if one wouldn't have known that this historic moment happened the night before, one wouldn't have seen it. Some shopkeepers told me that business has broken down and that they're worried about the future. One street vendor also told me that he's worried what will come now. So it is still that, like, most Afghans seem to be wary about what the future brings.
Yeah, a lot of uncertainty, Franz. We saw the pictures of the Taliban now fully in control of the airport as well. So what about foreign nationals and Afghans who want to leave the country? Can they still do so?
The Taliban have several times assured that foreign nationals and Afghans with the right travel papers are allowed to depart the country. So far before, it was because of the evacuation operation. The airport was only operated by these evacuation flights and very restricted to get inside. Now the civilian airport might open sooner than people might have expected. The Taliban have certainly an interest, and there are reports that they get support from Qatar or Turkey to again reopen the airport. How difficult it then will be for foreigners or Afghan nationals to leave remains to be seen. Foreign nationals, probably no big issue because the Taliban don't have an interest to hold them there. Afghans is another story, but one should also keep in mind that the Taliban probably also don't want to have Afghans here that might begin to resist their rule. So if some Afghans want to leave, the Taliban might not put that great obstacles into their way.
Franz, what can we expect from the Taliban now? Will they be able to form a government?
The Taliban are de facto in power. They have, since they entered Kabul, conducted talks with several politicians that haven't fled the country, reiterated that they want to have an inclusive government. But at the end of the day, their attitude is the attitude of victors. So they might include certain figures in a government, but at the end, they decide what will happen and who will rule and how. And given that they have, during the past 20 years, always said that the constitution that was in place, the system that was in place, wasn't Islamic or not Islamic enough, one can expect that there will be radical changes and that they will announce a government and try to implement this. And given that they managed to topple the government, they certainly have the power to implement several things.
Journalist Franz Marti reporting there from Kabul. Thank you very much for that update. Well, let's get some analysis on America's withdrawal now. We can speak to Liz Schulke. She's a U.S. political analyst here in Berlin. Liz, welcome to the show. The U.S. has essentially now said that it is withdrawn without getting all of its people out. How big of a problem is that?
The problem really depends on who you are. As Secretary Blinken said, the number of American civilians left in Afghanistan is in the low hundreds. However, we have left thousands of our Afghan allies behind. And although I love to hear it's optimistic that they might be allowed to leave, the Taliban have lists, and they have already, as Deutsche Welle knows, been going and trying to find some of these folks. And so I think it is a big problem that America kind of didn't live up to its promise to bring its allies back with them.
Well, Secretary Blinken has said this is the start of a new diplomatic phase with Afghanistan. I mean, what could that new phase look like?
As we saw, Ambassador Ross was one of the absolute last people to leave the country on the absolute last flight out. I worked at the State Department. I know how passionate the civil servants there are about the mission and about the country. And so they have tried to reiterate that this mission is not over. They're going to have an embassy, hopefully in work together with Afghanistan and with the Taliban in Qatar. And I think hopefully we'll see strengthened diplomatic ties kind of moving forward.
There are a lot of people who have been referring to this withdrawal as a failure of the West, but also, of course, of the U.S. as well. How much do you think this has damaged the U.S.'s credibility with its allies?
I don't think this is the first instance this war has damaged credibility for America. I think this is rightfully a wake-up call for America and the role that it plays in the world, both how America sees itself as well as what the world expects. The U.S. can't come in with military might and do nation building, and instead has to go back to those diplomatic missions that we talked about. And hopefully the dedication of these civil servants and the moving diplomatic actions will restore some of that credibility.
And yet we saw this extremely chaotic withdrawal in the last phase, and of course the horrific suicide bombings at the airport that killed U.S. Marines as well. So what do you think the fallout will be for President Biden?
That's a really serious question. I think looking forward, we have the midterms coming up. Now, Congresspeople and senators in their home states and their home districts can kind of spin this and present it in their own way. There is some distance between Biden and individuals in their districts. But I think Biden needs to really move forward with strength and talk about the 114,000 people that we have safely evacuated from the country, as well as really the progress diplomatically that we could see in the next 6 months. But it's absolutely something that will hammer him moving forward, and he needs to remain accountable for.
U.S. policy analyst Liz Schulke with us. Thank you very much.